So I'm going to walk you through the DIY construction of my backyard rink. So all the parts are off the shelf. It's made of plywood, 2x4s, and decking screws. With the exception of the white liner, that I buy at Iron Sleek, which is a shop out in Addison, Illinois, and has a lot of other hockey rink parts. You can also call them or go on the website, have them deliver it to you. A few pointers along the way. So I like to recommend building the frame when it's a little warmer out before a deep freeze in case you need to drive any stakes in the ground. It's also a little bit more comfortable out there. And then make sure that the frame is leveled before you set the liner and fill it. Then if you're going to do any lights, make sure that those go underneath of the liner. And then I learned the hard way, if it's really windy out, it might not be the best day to set the liner and try and fill it. And then last of all, make sure you join the Backyard Ice Rink Facebook group. It's a great resource for rink enthusiasts and lots of great information and inspiration along the way. So a little about my rink. It's about 21 feet by 36 feet. It's not a huge sheet, but it's a nice manageable size, which makes it a lot easier for filling it, for cleaning it, and then of course for shoveling snow off of it. We also had a lot of fun on it with 2-on-2 small area games. Our whole family got out there and had some friends over, but my kids definitely had to improve their turns and skating on it. There's nothing really wrong with getting better at turns, so it's kind of win-win. But before we get started on the instructional, it's important to remember the why that we go through this madness. As you'll see, it seems like it's a fair amount of work, but every year we've done it, I think for the last 6 years, it's been totally worth it. It's always been our favorite part of the winter, for sure. Okay, I'm going to try and show how this ice rink gets assembled by disassembling it. So we're going to reverse engineer it, try and give you a sense of how it's put together. So the way my system works is that half-inch plywood boards are actually attached. They're just screwed into the outside, into a wooden frame. So we can just take all the boards off and the ice rink still maintains itself. So the way I do it, I'll show you. Here's the liner. I'm just going to cut it and show you what it looks like underneath in there. So there's actually just an L-shaped 2x4. You see the rope light running on the inside there too. And then the liner itself just goes on top of that 2x4 frame. Kind of get sensitive here, I think. Kind of hard to see. But what I'll do is I'll start taking the boards off. I guess I'll start with the net holders. So this is just a 1x2 that just screws into these boards. And that's that. Those will come off first. And then I'll take the boards off, and these are just a couple 2x4s that I use to seam it. So I just screw those in. On the other side, to reinforce it a little bit, the corners end up being pretty stiff with this little piece screwed in here. And then what you'll see is there are these little numbered 2x4s that sit underneath, and those are, because it's not level, right? So there's an area where the 2x4 frame just sits flat on the ground. And I've cut all these little blocks and numbered them so that they help level it along the driveway on the deeper side. So that's kind of how that works. But I'll show you as I start taking it apart. So the next thing before I take the boards off, I just take out all these little kind of connector pieces that are holding it together in some place. Usually I think there's some plywood. Sometimes I use 2x4s. Just whatever keeps the plywood from getting too nasty and bowing up. But you can kind of see I have two gates in here. There's one over by the back door, and then the other one lines up right at the garage door. Sometimes I put blue plastic mats down so the kids can walk with their skates and get into the garage, but in reality, once they're out here, they're just skating the whole time anyway. But those are kind of my two gates. Okay, so this is what the frame looks like with no liner. The little blocks underneath. It's just L-shaped 2x4s. And these are just 90-degree 2x4s. And what I do, you'll see it when I take it apart, they stagger a little bit. So that kind of gives it like a little bit of the integrity of a box beam. This is really the idea. So it's a pretty simple way to build it. And then you can see the yard's relatively flat. So there I got a low spot, so that's shimmed up a little bit. You can see underneath of it. And it's flat there, it goes down, so I got some shims there. If you look at this side, it stays pretty flat. You can see a shim right there, just getting that corner up. It goes across, and then there's where it starts pitching. That's where I have those blocks that I was talking about that are all numbered. So they hold up that whole end. Once the rest of the ice melts, I get the rest of the liner out of here, but that's kind of how it is right now. So that's really my low side over the driveway. So the ice there ends up probably about 8 inches thick. It's probably at the, maybe more than that, maybe 9 or 10 inches thick. And then over here, because I fill it all the way to the top of the 2x4s pretty much, the 2x4 with a flat next to it is 5 inches. So we're going from about 5 inches to 8.5, 9 inches, maybe 10 inches. And then there's also a high spot right in here somewhere. That's probably where the thinnest ice is right around this high spot. And I figure there it's probably like maybe 3.5, 4 inches. So it's still plenty of ice. Works pretty well. Okay, so here you can see a little bit better what I'm talking about. Here's how the liner goes over the 2x4. So it's just an angle. It kind of runs, and you can see that's where it's up to make it a little bit more level. So I started taking the boards off. They're all labeled. So the boards themselves have letters. So C is over in this corner. And then I think A starts like right here at the garage. So it goes A, B, B, C, and then there's a CD, which is this one, which is a little 2-footer. So that one says, let's see, C and D, and then that's kind of where I start. So if you set the CD, then you can just start working your way around it. And it all lays out. But each one has one of the shorter screws in it. Let's see. It has one of these, like 1.5 inches. So the reason I do that is so that when you screw it into the boards, it doesn't go through and hit the liner. So if they're really wobbly, sometimes I take a longer screw and put it on the bottom of the board down here, making sure that it gets into the deep 2x4. So the key is that I don't want it to go through there and then it stick through and put a hole in the liner. But if I'm down lower, screwing into this other one, I got plenty of room. But for the most part, they're not too wobbly. All you're trying to do is keep the puck in. They're not like, checking each other against the boards. They're only 2 feet tall anyway. So, but that's how the boards work. So that's what they look like. So that way, when you actually assemble it, you overlap it like this, and you get a good joint when you screw them together. So it's kind of like how you build a house where you overlap the plates. Same idea. So you keep them stored as these L shapes, and they'll always have a long end or a flat end, and then the other one will be the opposite of that, and it'll just fit right on top of there, and it screws together and you're good to go. All right, so now we got the frame laying flat, got all the blocks out, so now I'll start taking the screws out of the frame and show you how that goes. Take corners out first. Kind of do with one hand while you're filming the video. Got a little wear and tear on them. Some will come apart easier than others. Sometimes the screw will break. But that's the basic idea. And then you just start taking them apart, and I'll show you. Most of them are, I think, in 10-foot lengths. So you don't want to take apart all the boards. I'll show you why. So all the boards here, or the, I don't know what to call them, the 2x4s, are also labeled. So I wrote on the top, north, east, south, west is on the top of them. Usually when I get them out of the garage, I lay them all out. And then they also have these letters on them. So starting at the garage door, you got A, and I think it goes this way. B, see that? B, and it gets to the corner. Just make your way all the way around, and I'll show you how to screw those together in just a minute. So after I have all the boards actually screwed together, or the 2x4 frame, then I lift it up and I put these blocks underneath of it. And the blocks are actually labeled. So there's 2 and 2. That one's 14 and 3, so that's not really right. But there's 4, 5, so it's kind of set up so all the pieces kind of go together. And then there's 9, 10. You can see I put the numbers on there. So you can pop those underneath, lift the whole thing up, and then screw those in. So I'll show you how I take those apart, or screw them in. You just put it underneath, and then there's just a screw that goes in the top here. that's it. That's it, just a block. Okay, so once you get the corners off, you just have this long stretch here, and you just flip it over where the two letters join together, and those are the screws that you're looking for underneath. So there's just two screws here that we're gonna take out, and that'll make this one thing into two segments. So it took me a couple years before I finally figured out how valuable this thing is. It's a laser level. This thing's pretty expensive. It's a couple $100. Literally the only thing I think I use it for is setting the ice rink. So you can't see it during the day, but if it was darker out, I just turn the laser on. I usually set it like on a block in the middle of the ground. And then you turn it on, and it'll shoot a laser all the way across the entire thing. So you can make sure that it's totally level. So you can see, if that side were down, this side would be too thin and all the water would pour over. So the laser level is really important. Probably just rent one from Home Depot, I would guess, or just buy one and use it for ice rinks and hanging photos, pictures on the wall, stuff like that. All right, so that's it. That's what it looks like, basically, once you have the frame set and you put out the liner and you're getting ready to fill it. So what I do is there's two spigots, one on each side of the house. I usually fill it with two hoses. So I put one on this end and I put another one on that end, just to try and fill it a little bit faster. I think it usually takes about, seems like last time I did it was about 4.5 hours to fill it, maybe four, something like that. It takes a little while, and then the whole time, all you can do is just kind of wait and make sure that nothing's moving too much or blowing out. And I don't put the boards on until it's totally frozen either. Just makes it a little bit easier once you have a big chunk of ice. But this is what it looks like when you lay the liner over. Other than right there, you don't want that to happen. That's because I cut it to show you everything earlier. But that's it.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna zoom into the jet ski.
Cold.
Yeah. I'm gonna get it from you. Is that good? Okay, so.
Okay, as I've taken the boards across, I'll show you a little bit more on the liner. So what I do is I fold it over the frame and then I put staples in it. So I just staple it to the outside. So you do one side, right? And then the other side you keep loose until you fill it with water. So that at least holds it so it doesn't, blow around too much. But because there's nothing else really holding it down. What you can see here is the liner looks like it's pretty far up on the edges. That's because I cut it. So usually the liner is going to be like way bigger when you buy it. So it's actually going to sit out like here. So you have a lot more slack on it. So you really just throw this giant sheet of plastic, start filling up with water, and then once it's full with water, it all tightens up and does its thing. But I just, put some regular staples in it just to keep it all under control. But that's really the idea. So that keeps it all flowing and loose on the ice side is how it works. So one thing you'll notice is all the boards screw from the outside. They're like 1.5 inch screws or something that screw on. But these 2x4s and the plates, I usually drill or screw from the inside of the rink. And that way I can get a little bit more beef into the 2x4 where you can even see it splitting there. And then I'm always trying to make sure I don't have screws sticking out through the wood on the inside, because it's not a whole lot of fun to skate into end of the screw.
It's fun.
One, and then here's the one here. Are you looking at me with the?
Yep.
Here. now I'll take the rest of these guys off. Okay, over on this side it gets a little bit weird, right? Because we have this planter thing. So what I do, I can't screw it into the boards, so I really just push the frame up close and I give it like an inch of space, and then I slide the boards in later. But in order to do that, while I fill the rink and the boards aren't on it, I put a bunch of these pieces of plywood in there just to kind of hold it away. So then I have like a spacer to then slide the boards in later. So that's why you see these little pieces of plywood. So it's a little bit tricky, but not too big of a deal. I've kind of learned over time the best way to do it. So these aren't screwed in, they just sit in there. So over here at the gate and by the corner of the planter, I got this kind of weird cut board. That was kind of over time, it didn't fit, so I ended up having to cut it down, but you can kind of see that's why that one's like that. It really just kind of fits in the corner where that planter is, and that's why it's like that, but it fits. Okay, so the lights. I probably went a little bit overkill this year, but what I did is I just got these little LED string lights off of Amazon, and I strung them across. There's a bunch of different sequences so that I got the blue lines and the center ice, and then as you guys saw, I got the Jets logo. And so the way I did it, I just kind of laid it out, and then I put these little roofing nails to hold it in place, because all the lights go underneath of the liner. That's what's kind of cool about it, is you put them on the ground and then you put the liner over it. So totally optional. Probably a little bit much this year, but it was fun. And then I also have the white rope lights that I put around the perimeter. And that kind of works well, except you see I put this tape over it because these clips, I was worried that these clips that I used to hold it in place were going to like puncture the liner. So there's some stuff, like it's probably just not worth doing the lights. It's too risky to put all that underneath the liner. But we had some fun with it this year and got lucky and it worked. But one more thing you're trying to do is make sure everything's level and nothing's gonna put a hole in the liner, because that makes for a not fun time waiting for the ice to freeze. Okay, so on the lights, I got a little bit crazy here, right? So I stapled the cords and did some other stuff, which is a little bit risky, but I was trying to keep them tight. So I don't know that they're gonna work after I take them out. Actually, I think one end wasn't working anymore anyway. So I think whatever lights you buy, you don't want to spend a whole lot of money, because chances are they're gonna get trashed and they're going in the garbage. But that's how I ended up doing that, kind of looping around, put some staples in it. Good times. Okay, so for the lights on the driveway side, it's kind of crazy. I need something to hold them down, so I actually put these little self-tapping screws into the asphalt. Kind of my idea there, so it worked. It's fine, but it's a little hard to fix lights to a driveway. All right, so I'm gonna take the net holding things off. So what I do is there's just a plastic loop up at the top, and I just put a bungee cord on there and connect it to whatever net you get. I had like a 10 by 10 net. You might want to try and get something a little bit wider and not as tall, but it worked pretty well. It just kind of keeps the pucks from totally flying out of control into the neighbors' yards. But it has 3 screws right there, and then it has 2 just on the angle. And this thing actually held up really well. I wasn't sure how it was going to do, but it's a little bit wobbly, but it's okay. It just has to hold the nets. So I'm just going to take these guys out. So these things are pretty nifty, actually. It's got a little bolt up at the top, and then it just folds up, so it's easy to store. And it's all pre-drilled, so you see the 3 holes that are pre-drilled there. That keeps it from splitting. But they held up pretty well. There's 4 of them. So when I drain the rink, this actually works pretty well. So everything pitches this way to the driveway, and then there's this area of drain right here. So basically when I drain it, I just cut a hole in the liner and let it drain up that corner for a while, and that goes all the way down to there and then comes out right there. So the rink ends up in the storm sewer down by the street.